welcome to Village Youth. My name is Kara and I am on the team at our Langley South location. We are so glad that you are able to join us today. Have you ever been working on a project, you're getting close to finishing, and you just decide to call something maybe good enough? You're not necessarily cutting corners, but you're definitely reaching a point where it's okay, we just gotta move on. Well, just last weekend I had a moment that was just like this. I had several friends over, we were having a little dinner party, it was lovely. There's chairs and tables and I'm getting the food ready and I'm in a beige phase right now, so everything is beige, white, neutral, it's all pretty, it's all clean, right? And I decided I wanted to make a little witty menu for it, so we did that too. And as we're setting up, we have these folding tables out, I put out the tablecloth, prop them up, put the chairs out, and then I bought these candles. Now, these candles, they're the tall ones, but there's something kind of wacky about them because they're actually too skinny for the candle holder that they're designed for. So when you put them in, they don't actually stand up, they start to fall over. And so I thought, well, this isn't gonna work. But I had this idea. What if I just take some paper and I wrap it around the bottom of it and I tape it there and it'll make it kind of thick enough to stay put and I can wedge it in, right? That'll work. And it was all set up, it looked great, a little rickety, but I thought, what's the worst that could happen? It's good enough. Well, let me tell you, part of the way through the dinner, someone bumped into the table and it wasn't just a little bump, but the table actually collapsed. Now, these candles were on the middle of the table, and as the table's falling, the candles weren't secure in their things, so they're falling over too. And I'm watching from a distance, it's all happening in slow motion. And my immediate thought is, this entire house is going to burn down, all because I did not secure my candles properly. And in the end, just spilled some candle wax, got a few burn marks on my white, beautiful tablecloth, but all was well. Now, here's the thing I'm thinking about. I looked at the candles as just this minor problem and thought it'll be fine, right? I don't need to worry about it. It's good enough. Problem solved, let's move on. And I wonder if sometimes if we do this in life, right? We see things and we go, it's fine. And usually it is, except for when then it isn't. And I also wonder, I think we do this with people sometimes too. We look at things or people who are struggling or going through something, and I go, they'll be fine. That's not really my problem anyways. Or similar, that's their problem, they can figure it out. I've got my own issues to deal with. Or, no one helped me when I went through that, why should I go help them? Just recently, I had my car broken into and a ton of things stolen, and they smashed windows and they left glass everywhere, and they made my car not drivable. They took a ton of things that weren't theirs to be taken. And when I started afterwards to look at the mess, I realized that actually a lot of people had come to help me in my moment of crisis. I made a list. There were 12 different people who came out of their way to help me. They drove me, they took me places, they picked me up. They showed up when my life was a literal mess. 12 different people. We dismiss helping others, but when we become the recipients of kindness from someone else, we are so grateful. I am so glad that people stopped to help, even though it was someone else's problem. Hey, well, one of the things we like to do here at Village Youth is we want to take a pause, we want to have a breather, and then we're going to take a moment to discuss and reflect with actually those around us right now. We're going to ask you a question, and we'd encourage you to turn to those around you. Students, take a look who's sitting next to you. Be sure to invite people into the conversation and to join you if they maybe don't have someone to join. So we're going to have a short break to discuss a question. Here's the question I want you to talk about. If you are going through a tough situation, what support would you want from your friends and family, and why? Take a minute, talk about it with the people next to you. All right, let's bring it back. Here's a thought I want us to start on. Sometimes we're slow to act. Now, we're quick to notice things, right? In an era where when someone starts yelling or something starts happening, we immediately whip out our phones to hit record and we see everything. But even though we see things, that doesn't always mean that we do anything. If you look back on the history of the world, our world revolves around us. And by us, I mean me, and I mean also you. Right at the start, Adam and Eve, they chose themselves over God. They chose to eat of the forbidden fruit and go against God's ways, what he had lined out for them. And then Sarah and Abram, two people that God had promised a lot to in the Bible, Specifically, they promised a child for their family. They chose then to make things happen on their own accord, and Abram went off and slept with another woman. They chose their own plan, their own control, their own timelines over God's plan. I Googled self-absorbance, right? And it's everywhere. And so I wanted to know who has made the most statues of themselves. So King Ramses II, a pharaoh in ancient Egypt, had not one, not two, but 350 statues built of himself and put up around Egypt. Now, talk about having a me-centric view of the world, right? We see this a lot in history, people who are obsessed with themselves. And sometimes I wonder, what's the equivalent of this today, right? Because we're certainly not building statues of ourselves and putting them in parks. But at the same time, we are taking a lot of selfies and we post them online, and we're curating our image and careful about the things that the attention that we draw to ourselves and how we do it. The idea of main character moments is not new to humankind. We're very, very well versed in it. In reality, the world does not revolve around us. Our problems, no matter how big or bad they may seem, will not stop the earth from rotating. Our problems will not stop the sun from rising, and it won't subside our need to go smash more pizza. On our best day, our worst day, our Friday, our Saturday, the sun will rise again. I've heard recently you can't be anxious and grateful at the same time. And it's really started to make me think, meaning it's really hard to be spiraling and spinning in your own thoughts while you're also appreciating the good things that you have in your life. And I wonder too if the same is true with empathy. I used to think God makes us go through things so that we can then go and help others and fix things and give them a step-by-step guide of what to do and how to help them. And maybe that is what God does, but also I'm realizing maybe God doesn't just have us go through things to help others, but also so that we can empathize with them. We get it. We don't have to fix it, but we can go, hey, I'm with you. I really do understand what you're going through, and you're not alone. It's awfully hard for us to be anxious about our own situation and care for others at the same time. In the book of James, Paul is writing to James, and he's noticed there's a lot of focus being put on their own needs and themselves. Here's what James 2:14-17 in the New Living Translation says. What good is it, dear brothers and sisters, if you say you have faith, but don't show it by your actions? Can that kind of faith save anyone? Suppose you see a brother or sister who has no food or clothing, and you say, goodbye, and have a good day, stay warm, eat well, but then don't give that person any food or clothing. What good does that do? So you see, faith by itself isn't enough. Unless it produces good deeds, it is dead and useless. Village youth, if we have the deepest of faith, if we know God, if we spend all our time with Him, that's beautiful. But if it never shapes or informs the things that we do, the way that we live, the character we have, James is saying, what good does that do? It's useless. It's phony. It's a little bit fake. We need faith. We need to be close with God, but faith alone is dead. Dead. That's a strong word, right? Our faith is intended as a call then to action. Our love is motivated to move, to do. If someone told you, that they loved you, but they never showed it through their actions, would you actually believe them? You'd probably be like, are you gonna show me? Buy me a Slurpee or get me a candy. Just reply to my text. Spend time with me. Just do something. I don't care what you do. Do something, right? Jesus acted out of love for us. Our love then can motivate us too to do. But yet, our warped sense of sin usually keeps us looking pretty inward and not outward. At Village Youth Langley South, some of our youth leaders have sweaters that kind of sum up our mission statement. And the mission and vision of Village Church is this. It's to see people transformed into fully devoted followers of Jesus. So we made sweaters with just that line, just the first part. It says, to see people. Weird? Kind of. But the heart is that we want to be people who see the people in front of us. We want to keep our eyes up and be followers of Jesus who aren't so self-absorbed and looking inward constantly that we miss the moments where God might want to use us to be His agents of change and restoration in the world around us. Our main character moments, they're fine, but they can't last forever. We got to lift up our chins and start looking at the people around us. Now, the second thing I want to get to today is that Jesus is sending you. A friend was recently telling me the church doesn't have anything for me. I wish there would be a group of people specifically for me and for people like me. Like, we need support. We need to do something about this. Something needs to be done. And I totally heard her. I totally understood what she was saying, but I looked at her and I said, in all love, maybe God's given you this passion so that you can go and make it happen. Maybe we need to stop waiting for someone else to do something and actually just go make the change happen for ourselves, right? And I think we can all find ourselves in this idea. We're waiting for the change to come before we do anything, right? Once someone comes, once I have my license, once I have closer friends, once I'm in high school, or maybe university, once I'm confident, once I make that team, once my acne clears up, then I'll go do these things. But if we believe that God has planted us here on purpose, and that He is in control of all of the details of my life, with the friends, with the locker, the bus route, the neighborhood, the job, coworker, science partner that I have right now, then we also must believe that God has a specific purpose and a plan in all of those details. He has put you there. So then we don't have to wait to be sent out by God, because we're sent out now. And so it starts to flip the question, right, of how can we then love others in those specific spaces and spheres that God has placed us? How can we leverage the influence and platform we already have for His glory? He wants to use you here and now. Romans 10:14-15 says this, also coming from the New Living Translation. But how can they call on Him to save them unless they believe in Him? And how can they believe in Him if they have never heard about Him? And how can they hear about Him unless someone tells them? And how will anyone go and tell them without being sent? That is why the scriptures say, how beautiful are the feet of messengers who bring good news. You see, Jesus invites us. He opens the door and says, I don't need you, but I'll use you if you'll let me. And so when we do this, we get to go on this wild adventure. It's funny how there's an intersection of prayer and often coincidences. Now, often before a youth night, your leaders are praying for things, specific things. And it's funny how often the exact things we pray for happen. Just this week, a group of leaders, we were praying for some students we hadn't seen in a while to come back to youth. And who do you think 20 minutes later walked in the door? 2 girls who hadn't come in the past 18 months. The same girls that we were praying would show up. God invites us to do the stuff with Him. In Romans, Paul is pushing again on the idea that faith alone is not enough, right? What's the first law of physics? For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Faith breeds action. Faith requires action. Are we willing to, rub shoulders with people, to see people, and then to act on what we see? Recently in Canada, we recognized Truth and Reconciliation Day. And if we're honest, followers of God in Canada, we're not known for some pretty good things. We're known for some pretty harsh things. And as for myself, as a follower of Jesus, I wrestle with this, with the track record, because it's not something that I'm proud of. And yet I believe that those things, while supposedly done in the name of God, were not God's heart for those people. We know God's heart and His character that He has, and that was not it. Now, the flip side here is, what if we start to rewrite the narrative, right? And knowing our culture, knowing the church hurt, knowing the history, it's not a small or an easy task. So what if we seek to be people who are authentic and vulnerable and courageous, doing things maybe a little bit wacky or uncomfortable, to be known by our action and our love? What if we listened first and just saw people? We showed up. We don't come with all the answers, but what if we just make people feel heard, right? What if we were known by our actions first? Not for having loud opinions or being bossy, but by people who lived out of love. The warp of sin in our lives, it keeps us focused on ourselves and less on others. But we don't have to stay there. Will we see people? It's not someone else's job, it is our job. Hey, well, this brings us to the end of today's lesson. Thank you for joining us. I hope this has encouraged and challenged you in some way. If you have any questions or something that maybe even stood out to you, feel free to reach out to someone you trust and discuss it more. If you're in person with us today at Village Youth, we're going to divide up into small groups to discuss this more. And if you're watching online, feel free to take a look at the questions below and maybe journal about the answers or chat about them with someone that you trust. We'll see you soon. Take care.